Hello and welcome to this short video. I'm just going to very briefly try and talk to you about these remedial pension savings statements. Now, the reason I'm doing a short video, despite the fact that we do have a full webinar available on our YouTube channel, is that some people are getting very confused very quickly. So I just want to highlight a couple of areas that would help you to indicate whether you have an issue to manage or not. So this here, what you can see on the screen is what the remedial statement looks like, and you may or may not have received these. They are not issued to everyone. So if you don't have one, don't worry. They're only issued in certain circumstances. Now you can see you've got a covering letter. You must read the covering letter. The covering letter tells you why you have received the statement and what are the references you need to check through these links. Please don't jump on the page and say you don't know what to do if you haven't read the letter. Okay, so you need to make sure that you do that and you refer to these reference points on the NHS Pensions website. Essentially, though, you've received a letter because the NHS Pension Scheme believes that at some point you exceeded something called the annual allowance. And the annual allowance is the limit on the tax-free pension growth we can have in our tax year. It's a strange calculation that we have to do for schemes such as the NHS, which I'm not going to get into on here, but you can watch the full explanation on our video on YouTube. But I do want to show you something that might help you understand a bit quicker whether you've had any action to take. If you've received one of these statements, you definitely do need to look at it, but it doesn't mean that you have any tax to declare and pay. Now, what you can see here is one of the tables that you get within the statement, and I have just made up these numbers for illustrative purposes, and you will need to look at yours. It should show the new and the old amount. Now, this is an NHS pension statement. I know for some of the other schemes like the civil service, it will look a little bit different and it doesn't show you the old amount. But this is the one I'm focusing on for the moment for this purposes of this video. Now, usually if you receive one of these statements, what it is saying is that when we add the 95/08 plus 2015 together, either under old or new, that there is a number in there somewhere that comes to more than the allowance. And that's why you've received the statement. So let me give you an example. If we look at 21/22 here, I've got an input amount of 57,000 and another input amount of 1,000. When I add those two together, I get 58,000, which is more than the allowance of 40. And that's why you've been sent the statement. If you look at the old input amounts as well, in this example, we've got old ones that are also over the 40,000. But what we want to focus on, particularly if you've not seen one of these before, is the new amount here. So where we've got a year where we have gone over our allowance, what we are able to do is look at the 3 previous tax years. So in this case, I've gone over in 21/22. I can therefore look at 2021, 1920, and 1819. And if I have allowance that I did not use in those years, then I can offset where I have gone over the allowance. So for example, in the 2021 year, I had £25,000 against an allowance of 40,000. And therefore I had £15,000 of allowance that I did not use. And I can carry that over to help me where I'm over the allowance now. Similarly, the year before, I had 37,000 against 40. So I've got £3,000 of allowance that I didn't use. And the year before that, again, I've got 27,000 against 40. So I've got 13,000 of allowance that I didn't use. So I start with the oldest year first. So I'm £17,000 over my allowance. And I've got £13,000 of unused allowance here, so I can take that off. So that now means that I'm only £4,000 over my allowance. And I've got £3,000 from the year before, from the 1920 year, so I can take that off. So that still leaves me with £1,000 where I'm over the allowance. And finally, in 2021, I've got £15,000 worth of allowance, so I can take that off. So I've covered where I have gone over the allowance. If you can do that, then you've got no further action to take because you haven't got any tax to declare or pay. Okay, now you start with the oldest year first, as I did, and you roll it forwards, because if I had then gone over the allowance in 22/23, I can then go back to the 3 years prior to that. So I need to make sure that I keep a running total of any carry forward that I've used, so I know how much I've got left in case I need to use it again. But if you get one of these statements and you don't know what to do, and you've never paid annual allowance charges before, have a look first of all to see if you've got enough unused allowance from those earlier years to offset where you may have exceeded. And where you have, there is absolutely no further action for you to take. The only concession that I will make here is this assumes that you have the standard allowance. And if you were a higher earner, then you may have had a lower allowance at some point, and you will need to get that checked. Now, a higher earner between 16, 17 up to and including 19, 20 is somebody whose income was over £110,000. So if that is you, you will need to double check to see if you've got a reduced allowance. If it is not, you have the standard allowance as you can see on the statement, and you can just do that calculation as we set out there. I hope that answers some of the questions that are coming through, but obviously if you do have any other queries, do let me know.